Welcome to your daily dose of theological German. We are now on installment number 18 in this book, The Kingdom of God and Christendom. We're looking at an excerpt that has to do with the prophet Ezekiel. So it's a pretty easy sentence today, but we're going to do some stuff in a minute with cases and genders that's going to be worth your while, I promise, so stay tuned. But let's translate it first. Thus, the idea, or you might say picture or image, notion, the idea of individual preservation receives, okay, so here you have your classic structure, right? You've got sort of an adverb, I guess you could say, but here it's kind of got a discursive function, but then your verb has to be in second position. Your subject then gets pushed off down here somewhere after the verb, and the subject, of course, is a full nominal phrase, including this genitive chunk here. Okay, so that's your classic structure. So the idea of individual preservation receives through him. Now this pronoun here could be referring, I'm thinking it refers to Ezekiel, through him, but it could also be through it. It might be that there's some sort of concept or idea in the previous discourse that is being picked up here. So it's not totally clear to me. I'm just going to say through him. I think either way the basic semantics stays intact no matter what you do. So through him, i.e. Ezekiel, through him, the individual preservation, the picture of individual preservation, receives its, now you have this possessive pronoun, its place in the expectation of the future. This is a compound word here. And so you've got Zukunft, which is going to be the future, and Erwartung being expectation. So the expectation of the future, and this little S in here that joins them tells you that the relationship between those two parts is kind of genitive, which is why you would say expectations of the future. Okay, so a pretty straightforward sentence, and it kind of has the basic structure, not too complicated. So in this sentence, we have some good examples of the ambiguities that can arise when you're trying to understand what case something is and how it might therefore be functioning in the sentence. And so I just want to look through a couple of things here in this sentence because I think it'll just be good review and just give us a chance to dig in a bit deeper on something we haven't done a lot of on this channel, even if it is a bit rudimentary. So I think you'll find this helpful and sort of insightful and good reminding. The first one I want to look at here is this D, this article, which goes with Vorstellung, which tells you something about this noun. I translated it as the subject, but that's not necessarily so obvious. Objects can sometimes come before subjects, so you can't tell just from the word order that it's the subject. You need to try to identify the case here. And so to do that, you want to look at that article, D. Now, the problem with D is that, well, you know for sure with D it's either feminine or it's plural. It can't be masculine or neuter. It has to be one of those two things. So that kind of helps you. If it's feminine, it could be nominative or accusative, though. There's no differentiation. If it's plural, same thing, nominative or accusative. Now, we know that die Vorstellung, we know that Vorstellung is a feminine noun. And so that obviously makes sense, but that doesn't really narrow it down whether it's nominative or accusative, and so you can't say for sure just from the morphology whether this is going to be the subject or the object. And depending on what type of clause you're looking at and so forth, it's conceivable the object might be showing up in this position. So you want to keep going and sort of identify some more parts in the sentence to kind of narrow it down. So the ambiguity is not immediately resolved when you get to the next sort of noun phrase. It begins with der. Der, of course, if it's a masculine noun phrase, is going to be nominative. And if that's the case, then you would think, okay, then die Vorstellung is probably going to be the object. It's going to be accusative. But that's if it's masculine. In this case, you can see it's der Bewahrung with an adjective in between the article and the noun. But that noun, Bewahrung, is a feminine noun again. And so anytime you see a noun ending in this ending, ung, it's going to be feminine. And so you know that der Bewahrung is feminine. Now, when der is an article for a feminine noun phrase, then it's going to be either dative or genitive. And so you have to just kind of decide from the context which of those two it is. And in this case, obviously, it's going to be genitive. So you have the idea of individual preservation. Okay, so we've kind of worked something out here. We know that that's genitive, which means now we're still back wondering whether die Vorstellung is nominative or accusative. And it's looking more and more like it's going to have to be the subject, but let's just quickly check out the last little bit here. So the next noun phrase is introduced not with an article like we've seen so far, but with a possessive pronoun or a possessive adjective, you can call it. Possessive adjectives are made up of two parts. The first part is the pronoun, ihr, here in this case. And so the pronoun has to refer back to some other noun in the sentence. In this case, it's going to be referring back to Vorstellung. And so let's take a look at that for a second. The pronoun, there's kind of a whole paradigm for them. I'll just list a couple of them here. You have normally pronouns that look like this: ich, du, I and you, he, sie, she. And when these become possessive, they take on a different form. So ich becomes mein with some kind of an ending, du becomes dein, becomes sein, and sie, she, becomes ihr. So that's obviously the one that we're looking at here, which makes sense because Vorstellung, as we've already discussed, is a feminine noun. And so that's the pronoun part of this possessive pronoun slash adjective. The second part is this ending, en. Now, when you take this ending, the best way to understand how to know what this ending is doing in terms of its morphology is just to think of how it would look if that ending was put on an article. So for instance, den, you would recognize. Similarly, einen, you would recognize. And so you can see that ihren is really just part of a larger paradigm of what you might call specifiers, okay? And so articles, indefinite and definite articles, possessive adjectives, and a few other kinds of adjectives kind of have this specifying type of function, and you'll see that they always take these endings. In fact, adjectives in general will take the same endings, provided there's not some other specifier that already has that ending to tell you the case and gender in question. And so if there is no article or similar specifier, then any adjective would also take those similar endings to complement the noun that they're modifying. But in the case of a possessive adjective, you really kind of have two sets of case and gender. So you have the pronoun, which you've already discussed, ihr, and that's going to match the case and gender of the noun that it's referring to. So Vorstellung is going to be a feminine. We still haven't totally said in this analysis whether it's accusative or nominative, but it is nominative, and this is going to match that. And then you have the second part of it, the n part, and that is actually going to match the thing that is being possessed. And so let's take a look at how that paradigm works out for a second, because it's going to work the same for einen and den and ihren. And so for the n ending, einen, den, ihren, for that part of the paradigm, you obviously have to know that it can be either masculine or it can be plural. And it's just going to depend on the noun that's modifying. You'll have to see which one of those things it is. If it's masculine, it would be accusative. If it's plural, it would be dative. In this case, the noun in question is Platz, and we know that that is singular masculine, and so we know that this whole noun phrase is accusative. And since it's accusative, then we know that it's the object, and die Vorstellung is going to be the subject, and so then you kind of can work out the rest of your syntax from there. Okay, so we only have one more in this sentence to look at. This last one also is introduced with the article der. You'll recall from earlier that der is either going to be masculine or it's going to be feminine. We know it's feminine in this case because der Zukunftserwartung is a feminine noun based on this ending here. You should be able to pick that up, or you can look it up in your dictionary if you're not sure. And since it's feminine, we know it can be either dative or genitive, and we are going to choose from context that it's going to be dative, and also because of this preposition here, which generally takes dative objects, but in the context you kind of see how it's working and you know it should be dative. So that's how you sort out all of those cases, and once you've kind of sorted them out and narrowed by process of elimination which one has to be nominative, which one has to be accusative, you can see by the process we went through that really there's just no ambiguity left, because one had to be accusative, and so then the other one that was ambiguous kind of had to be nominative. Anyways, and on it goes. Kind of rudimentary stuff, but hopefully you found that a helpful review, and please do share this video with anyone you think might like a little lesson in those cases, because I think the visuals on this one were especially helpful. As always, thank you for watching, and please do like and subscribe and share with all your friends.